Yes. We are filming today for Hamilton Jazz Archive, and we're very pleased to have pianist Ralph Sutton with us today, who's on campus for what I'm sure will be a marvelous concert with a great cast of people that we'll talk about in a while. We appreciate you joining us for an interview, and I understand that you started out with Jack Teagarden years ago. Is that right? Was that your first kind of entry into the music business, or was there?
No, I started out when I was 9 years old.
When you were 9?
Studying piano through grade school, high school, and Ford College.
Mm-hmm.
I was in college when I joined Jack Teagarden when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
Went from a Missouri farm boy to New York City. It scared me to death.
Was that culture shock or what?
I don't know. It was a shock. I don't know how much culture was involved, but so that's how I got to know Jack.
In Missouri, what kind of music did you hear as a child growing up?
Well, it was a radio station in St. Louis.
Okay.
And they had a little program on there called Harlem Rhythm, 15-minute program every morning. And that's where that's how I got started, hearing Duke Ellington, Basie, and Fats-Olo Walero.
You can expand on that.
Well, that's Fats Waller.
Yeah.
And I mentioned coming over today, Rochester was interviewing Fats one time and said, what is this thing, what kind of music you playing, Fats, this thing, swing or what? He said, well, Fats says, you get that right ticking rhythm, man, and it's on.
It's figure that out, right?
Yeah.
The right ticking rhythm.
Did he put the G on the?
No, right ticking.
Right ticking rhythm, man, and it's on.
You do that pretty well. You say that pretty well. What, when you were growing up and you were listening to that, was the music called, did it have a name? Was it called swing? Was it called jazz?
No, I think the laymen, the guys that couldn't play anything, they just listened. They had to put labels on things to understand what the guys were playing.
Right.
The musicians didn't.
They didn't need to
call it anything, you know.
I think it was the same thing with when bop started. I think I read that the critics called it bop.
Mm-hmm.
The musicians just played it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you move from what particular circumstance took you from Missouri to New York?
Well, Jack Teagarden sent a telegram to the school. I was going to college in Kirksville, Missouri. And he sent a telegram. Well, he'd been through and played a dance in the Armory building in Kirksville. And I didn't have the money to get in to hear Jack, you know. But I knew Jack, I mean, through a couple of movies he'd been in, and I loved Jack's playing, and I had to get in to see him. So there happened to be a window open downstairs in the Armory building, and I found that it was unlocked, and I got through that way and got upstairs, you know, mixed with the customers.
That's great.
And I sat in with
You sat
Jack,
in
yeah.
that night? Wow.
Because some kids in the audience say, hey, Jack, we got a piano player here, and I'm shrinking back. I don't want to. But anyway, Jack says, come on up. He says, what do you want to play, Gate? And I said, well, I picked my dad's favorite tune back home in Indiana. So that's how and then a month later, he sent a telegram to the Osteopath School trying to locate a piano. This was back during World War II, and he was losing musicians.
Yeah.
And so they located me, and I answered right back.
I think I'll come, right?
I quit school and everything.
That's a great story, and so many of the musicians we've talked to have little stories like that kind of really turned their lives in one direction or another. Like, you chose to sneak through that window that night.
That's right.
Look what happened. Did you ever pay him for the ticket, though?
Pardon?
Did you ever pay him for the ticket?
Oh, for the Army?
Yeah. I hope not.
No.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how big a part that the radio played back at that time.
Right.
that everyone has mentioned that they listened to, their first exposure to a lot of this music was the radio.
Radio is much better than television is today, you
Mhm.
know. Really. This is, I won't go into that.
Yeah, I know. We could do a whole hour on that, probably. So when you got to New York, and how long did you stay with that
I was
group?
with Jack for about 3 months, and then I was drafted in the Army.
Okay, that was my next question. You did do the Army
Yeah.
thing. Did you do music in the Army?
No, I tried to get into the band,
Yeah.
but they needed cannon fodder. They put me in the infantry. And I went through the basic training, and
Yeah.
then I ended up in the 104th Division, and I got in a band with the 104th Division.
Mhm.
I was playing glockenspiel in the marching band.
I was going to ask, because a couple other piano players have mentioned that they had to play something that they could get out on the field with.
Yeah.
Yeah. The glockenspiel. And how long were you in the Army for?
About 2.5 years.
As soon as you could get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. And how about after that?
I got out of the Army, and let's see, I was down in the Mojave Desert on maneuvers. I ended up in Colorado Springs at the Camp Carson,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I got my discharge. And took the train back to St. Louis from Colorado Springs, and my first job was in East St. Louis at a place called Bowman's. It was a restaurant, and they had gambling in Illinois then. So that was my first job,
Mm-hmm.
playing piano in this restaurant.
Can you tell us how the lessons you took as a child, what other kind of learning you had to do to become someone who could play with Teagarden and also do solo piano?
Well, when I was going to high school, my dad started a little country band. He played the violin by ear,
Mm-hmm.
and he got a group together. We used to play country dances and the picnics,
Uh-huh.
church picnics, and things like that. And that's how I got started playing.
So that's when you got to start develop your ear for learning songs
Yeah.
more by ear than from
Well,
music.
you'd buy the sheet music
Uh-huh.
for 35 cents a copy,
Right. Uh-huh.
and you'd learn the tunes that way. you
Yeah.
know.
Did you learn the chord symbol, to read from chord symbols at that time?
No, I
Or
read
was
just
you
right from the
reading
music.
from the music?
The chord symbols above it, I didn't pay attention to that. It was for the
I
guitar.
see.
I think it was for the guitar player or something.
Yeah,
Something like that.
but when you went with Teagarden, there had to be a certain amount of playing by,
Arrangements.
yeah.
He had a big band.
He had a big band, yeah.
And so that's what the piano player did.
Right.
You know, you hope.
So it really was important to be able to read.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
well, I did that from the beginning.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm. What was your next, what you consider to be your big important engagement, perhaps, after?
Well, I worked
Yeah, so-
around St. Louis in the Chase Hotel in the Park Plaza.
Uh-huh.
I was on staff, one of the musicians of the radio station. I'll never forget the guy that had the band on this radio station. His name was Carl Hohengarten, and he started Gordon Jenkins out. Gordon was from a suburb of St. Louis, and he started Gordon Jenkins
Mm-hmm.
out, and he used to write. We used to play behind the singer on this radio station, Jackie Hill, and Carl would do the arrangements and conduct the group, the band, and he wrote in some tough keys. Man, there would be a lot of black specks on that paper.
Was that because it was for a singer?
Yeah, we played
Yeah.
behind this singer.
I know. It seems like every time you get behind a singer, you end up too many flats.
Furnished or unfurnished.
Yeah. Ooh, good one. Good singer.
But then from then, I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I rejoined Jack Teagarden on, he was going into the famous door on 52nd Street. And it had, in the band, he had Max Kaminsky, Jack Lesberg, Peanut Succo, Eddie Shaughnessy on drums, and myself on piano.
You know, Ed Shaughnessy mentioned that engagement to us.
Did he?
We talked to him in Los Angeles, and that must have been one of his first, I think, really memorable engagements for him.
Well, Eddie's from New York, isn't he?
Yeah, he's from that area, and he told us this story about how he got his first drum set, and then he used to go into New York and go to all the clubs, and he mentioned that engagement, that he felt that was really where he started to feel like, I can do this. This is great. What was 52nd Street in that area of New York like at that time?
It was swinging.
Yeah, swinging.
Oh, yeah, it was all the clubs, two sides of the street, you know, on that side and this side. And Art Tatum was playing there, and I'm trying to think. Well, it was about the time, too, that when Jack got together with Louis Armstrong, and they had Louis Armstrong All-Stars. And I'll never forget the night I went with Jack in a taxi cab over to Town Hall where they did it was a Louis Armstrong concert. Well, they had Bobby Hackett, and I think Bob Haggart played on that. And Dick Carey was playing piano, and Sid Catlett. And Peanuts was on that too, I think.
Right.
And it was recorded for RCA Victor. But I never forget, I was sitting up in the balcony looking right down at all the guys, you know, and I'm getting goosebumps, you know, listening to that wonderful music. It knocked me out. Well, from there on, that's when Jack and Louis and the All-Stars with Barney Bigard and Big Sid, that's when that started. And then I'd lost my job since after Jack went with Louis, and of course I didn't have a job.
Okay.
So I had to sweat out my union card too.
Can you explain what that meant?
Well, you had to spend so much time in the area, in the city. You could take a job here and a job there, You couldn't take a steady job for about 3 months or something like that. I think it was 6 months before you got your card or something like that.
Huh.
Finally got it.
To establish residency or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, they really checked on you.
The union was not something to be trifled with, I guess, at that time. How much did it cost to join the union back then?
I can't remember.
It's a lot now.
I don't. Yeah, is it how much?
I think so, quite a bit now. But so you had a reputation, at least you had on your resume, that you played with Teagarden, and did that help you get it? What was your next engagement?
Well, I worked like at the Hickory House and the Village Vanguard. This is after I got my union card. The Embers, used to call it the Numbers. The Embers in different spots before I went to work at Eddie Condon's in Greenwich Village. That was in 1948.
Could you describe for our students who may be trying to put things in a historical perspective what...
Hysterical or hysterical?
That too.
Yeah.
Was it hysterical back then?
Well, we had a few laughs.
What was it like to make a living as a jazz musician back at that time? Without getting personal about how much you made and everything, but was it a life that you felt was what you really wanted to? Was it easy? Was it hard?
Both. At times when you run out of money, it'd be hard.
Yeah.
But well, the times were different then, and it always seemed like when you get a job someplace, maybe a one-nighter, someplace you go out of New York, or you get it in New York City, why it seemed like all the guys were getting along real fine. You know, there was no, and we just played for the enjoyment too.
Yeah.
There was nothing uptight about anything,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
It could be that way nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, they say the scene has changed a lot. I don't
Oh,
think there's
yeah.
as many places to play,
And
I guess.
there was a lot of enjoyment
Mm-hmm.
then, you know.
And sharing of ideas.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, I know Fats Waller was an influence on your playing. Is that a fair statement?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've loved Fats from the beginning of my musical experience when I started at 9, and he'll be with me till I'm gone.
Mm-hmm. He wrote some great tunes, too.
Oh, he was a wonderful musician. I always like what Fats said. He says, I was born ballin', and I'm going to have a ball as long as I live.
What a character. Who else was some people you listened to and maybe grabbed a little bit of influence from?
Well, I've played with a lot of different guys that are gone now. They've died. But I've learned from so many of the guys on the different instruments, you know.
Right, not just piano.
Yeah, that's right, sure.
Right.
You just try to keep your ears open.
Mm-hmm. Good statement. I'd like to quote you on that. Keep your ears open. Yeah. When you fellas play tonight and tomorrow, if you had to put a name, style of what it is you do, would you call it something? Now, we were in LA and we heard the Classic Jazz Festival. Is that what you would call, or wouldn't you call it anything?
I wouldn't call it anything.
Call it anything.
I always like what Eddie Condon says. We call it music.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, it's hard because people ask me, well, it was classic jazz. What does that mean? And is it different from Dixieland?
And who gave these names to all this
Mhm.
different kinds of music you hear?
Right.
It's the layman that
Right.
lay it on
I
it.
guess we have to ask the critics then.
You know, the critics, that's another thing.
Talk about critics.
Well, you could, I often thought I could be a critic's critic.
Good, all right.
I could really
Yeah,
lay
you
it
could start
on.
writing articles about the critics. Yeah. What is it that annoys you about them?
Well, they couldn't make a living, if they played an instrument, they couldn't make a living playing,
Yeah.
so they have to,
They have to write about it.
yeah.
How much have you been able to do some traveling around outside the country?
Quite
with
a
some of
bit.
the groups you played.
Australia, Japan, Europe, Great Britain.
Wow.
I'll never forget when I was with Bob Haggart and Yank Lawson, and it's with a band that was called the World's Greatest Jazz Band. Of course, none of the musicians named it that. It was the guy who started or got the thing together with the help of Bob Haggart and Yank Lawson. He called it the World's Greatest Jazz Band. I'll never forget one time we were playing in Honolulu, and then we came back and played one night in San Francisco at a place called Earthquake Lagoons, and the next day we get on the plane, we fly up to Alaska. You know, that was quite a hop.
Wow.
And for a one-night concert.
I guess so.
Then back to the States.
For one-nighters like that.
Yeah.
We went to Palm Springs, I think, right after that, remember?
That's right,
Wow.
That was the party at Thunderbird.
yeah. Right. That was a football player's birthday party, wasn't it? Remember that?
Well, Hoagie and Phil Harris were there.
That's right. I remember that. Got Hoagie on the piano.
As soon as we walked in the place, these women members of the Thunderbird Club said, now don't let Hoagie and Phil sit in tonight. First thing they said, we were just walking in the place in the afternoon.
Yeah.
They were all ready for it. Because they were on the bad list, you see.
Oh.
Hoagie and Phil did some naughty things in front of the whole membership. The women objected to their language, you see.
But they ended up playing anyway.
Came in anyhow,
Yeah.
sat in.
Yeah, Hoagie on the piano, with Phil Harris sitting on drums.
Playing on drums, yeah.
Then he went over backwards, didn't
Yeah, he got off the stand and fell right down, smacked on his
No kidding.
Bandstand.
We were
Wow.
having a few tastes that night.
Yeah.
I think he got his foot caught in a wire, you know, a microphone.
Oh,
wire,
no kidding.
And he went crashing down. And that
Another point for his reputation.
It
Women-
broke up the party, didn't it?
Wow.
Don Hudson, was that the football player?
I don't remember the football.
Don Hudson. Anyway,
What was different? Is there a difference playing overseas with the audiences?
for me there is.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy that a lot, to play in England, Scotland. I
Mhm.
just had a tour of England, Scotland, and Ireland last month. But there seems like there's a different sort of warm appreciation.
Mhm.
They really makes you feel good.
Yeah, great. When you go to those places in recent years, who are your bandmates that you like to?
I usually go by myself.
Oh, you play solo.
Well,
or
I
you
know
play
I
with a group
join
over
up
there,
with
yeah.
the guys wherever I go.
See, that's a concept that is really interesting, I think, to students, and the idea of going across the seas and you don't know who you're going to play with, you know, and the number of songs that you have to have at your disposal. I mean, if you're in Ireland, for instance, what kind of songs do you expect those musicians to be able to know?
Though I don't expect anything.
You don't expect it.
No. Sometime I'll play solo when I
Yeah.
go in. Or this last trip in, not Belfast, but the other one, the city.
Edinburgh?
No, in Ireland.
Oh boy, here we go.
Okay, anyway,
Geography. Dublin?
that's it. I played with, they had two pianos. At this one night, two
Mhm.
pianos, and a bass man and a drummer. So that's how that worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So-
And you call a tune and hope they know it, or they say, or
No,
you
we
have a
just-
meeting?
It's easy. How about playing this? Okay, if you don't know that, or somebody said, maybe I don't know it.
Right.
You know, so
Right.
you get, it's not that hard.
Okay.
Everything falls into place.
But it's still interesting, I think, for classical musicians too, to think how that works. You know, I don't know if a classical, if you got three classical musicians together, if they could play enough songs from memory. You know, shall we play Haydn Sonata? Or
They
what?
better bring the music
They
along.
would probably bring the music. Yeah.
That would help.
How has the business of jazz changed for you over the years?
Changed for me?
Changed? Has it changed for you? Has it been fairly consistent?
It's been fairly consistent, I think.
Has the style that you play in, do you feel that has is it something that you think that other people have picked up on? Do you think that you've influenced other players?
I don't know.
You don't know, but I bet you have.
I really don't know.
Yeah. Well, who do you listen to these days? You listen to, you spend a lot of time listening to music?
No.
Yeah, I know that a lot of musicians don't maybe listen as much as some non-musicians. It's like, when it's your actual work.
No, it's not my actual work.
It's not your actual work?
You wouldn't call it work, would you?
Well,
Playing?
I would call it work.
Would you?
Yeah, I would call it, maybe if you're going to call it employment. You know, it's how you make your living.
I never thought of it
Never
that
thought
way.
of it as work. That's great. That's really great. That
Yeah. It's a pleasure.
it's a pleasure. That your employment is a pleasure. See, not many.
As long as
people-
you're playing with the guys you like. you
Yeah.
know. But I avoid playing with the
Mhm.
people I don't like.
This is-
That wouldn't be any fun, I would.
No, it wouldn't. Yeah, it's nice to have the liberty, I guess, to be able to say, no, I'd rather not do that. You know?
Well, you have to make up your own mind about. You might play one night with a guy. Well, you never want to hear this cat again. You know what I mean? You stay away from it.
Yeah, yeah.
Avoid it.
Who are some of the singers that you've played behind that you enjoyed?
Jimmy Rushing.
Mm.
He was one of my favorites. Well, Jack Teagarden sang.
Yeah.
I remember working at the Village Vanguard behind Maxine Sullivan, who I adored. And there's another gal singer, Chippy Hill. Yeah. But Lee Wiley. I remember I played behind her at the Village Vanguard with Max Kaminsky and Arthur Trappier. He took Slick Jones's place on drums with Fats Waller.
Mm-hmm.
We were working as a trio at the Vanguard, and Lee Wiley was married to Jess Stacy at the time, and she came in. She was on the show at the Village Vanguard. And I don't know whether she and Jess were getting along too well or not, but you could never get that tempo right for Lee Wiley, you know. We'd have a rehearsal, you know, and she's going to sing at this tempo. And I'd try to set the tempo. I remembered like she liked to sing it. And she'd turn around, you know, and give you a look, and I'm thinking, I'm going to stay away from singers, man. But anyway, I loved Lee's singing, you know. I'll never forget her coming into the Eddie Conants Club later on. I can't say what our conversation was about. I mean, we were very friendly, you know. But she sort of apologized to me for, you know, being very sarcastic on sometimes on the job, you know. But we settled it. There was no problem.
That's good. Yeah, working with singers can be a little nerve-wracking occasionally,
yes.
Especially if you hit a chord they don't particularly like and it throws them off, and you get one of those looks.
Well, I always thought, for the most part, that you couldn't compare singers with musicians. You know what I mean? You work with a wonderful guy like Jimmy Rushing or Jack Teagarden or somebody that's singing. There was no problems at all. It was right in there, you know. But that didn't always work.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it probably helps when a singer is a player of an instrument.
yeah, knows what's going on.
Right.
You know.
They're able to hear and deal with little things that come up a little more gracefully, if you know.
Yeah.
When a singer stops, that's when you start.
I'll never forget. This reminds me of a story. One time I'm playing in St. Louis, and it was at a fashion show, and they had this gal singer on. And this goes back in the 40s, 19. And this gal was singing, and I'm accompanying her, and she turned around and gave me some stuff, you know, like. And, well, it's something I wouldn't take. I said, I just got off the piano and walked away. I said, okay, go ahead and sing, you know.
Well,
simple as that.
I bet she didn't give the next person she played with the same look. You probably saved someone else some embarrassment down the road. Yeah. Wow. Now you have seen a lot of styles in music come and go. Some of them have come and stayed. Can you tell us what some of the change is in music that you really enjoyed, or some that you did not enjoy? Was there anything that happened, you know, since the 40s that has really been, you think, significant for you as far as changes in music, either positively or negatively?
Would you repeat that?
Well, I'm thinking of, like, how did the rock and roll revolution, if you want to call it that, affect your employment? Did it have any effect on what you did?
Well, you don't make the same kind of money that rock and rollers make,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But I've never paid any attention to it because I never listened to it. It doesn't doesn't interest me.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
just did your own thing. How
There's
about,
only two kinds of music, you know,
tell us.
good and bad.
Uh-huh.
I always try to stick on the one side.
Stick on the one side.
Yeah,
And play with the good guys, too.
yeah.
Yeah. When, did the end of World War II have an effect on musicians' lives that time? When swing when the swing era kind of really ended, I guess. Can I say it ended after World War II? In effect, when the big bands had such a hard time keeping on the road and so forth? Or were you more working in the smaller groups at that point?
The only big band I was with was Jack Teagarden.
Teagarden, yeah.
So, it used to be, you know, you turn the radio on, you'd hear big bands broadcasting from all over, you know.
Right.
But that faded out, and, well, you did have the records to listen to.
Yeah.
And things changed. That smaller groups, trios, worked as in a trio or quartet, or a 6, 7-piece band, or 9-piece band. But I didn't pay too much attention. I just kept doing my own thing.
Doing your own thing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what a recording session was like back in when you were with Teagarden, or some of those days? What a recording session involved as far as the time and so forth? Because we read about nowadays with some of the groups how they have huge budgets and they spend months making an album. You know, what was it like back then when you were able to record with?
You went and did the record date, and I don't know, a record session would be like 2.5 hours or something like that per day, and it was much simpler. I mean, and now with all the noise going on, it takes them months to do it.
Yeah. Did you get paid a union session fee?
Union
Is that what that-
scale, yeah. I think it was like, what was the union scale, Bob? $47 for a record date, or
$41.25.
is that
You
so?
got a pretty good memory.
Before that was 30.
Oh yeah.
I went to $41.25, and now it's I think it's $500 for an album for 2 sessions,
And how long can a session be?
3 hours,
Yeah,
and then after that it's overtime,
yeah,
whatever that comes to.
right. When was the last recording you did? Was it a solo recording? I have some of your solo work.
No, the last one was this year in July, I think. Did it in New York for Matt Domber.
Right.
Jake Hanna was on drums, and Rosemary Galloway was on bass. It's a trio date.
He's got a nice label there,
Yeah,
Arbor Records.
and he's a nice guy, too.
He sure is. We saw him out in L.A. and it's really great to have you gentlemen on campus to be able to play what you're going to play tonight, which we won't put a name to because I think it'll just be good music. And if you had a young friend who was going to go into music as a career, was considering it, would you have anything to tell them to keep in mind along the way? Other than don't quit your day gig, you know.
No, well, the first thing you have to do, you have to enjoy what you do. You have to enjoy what you do and love it. And I think if you're enjoying it, that'll take care of itself. You know what I mean?
Right.
You got to enjoy it first and have fun with it. Otherwise, you're going through life.
I've got a feeling from what you've said today that has been something that's actually guided you through your life. Like,
Right.
I'm not enjoying this, so I'm not going to do this. That's a great philosophy. And,
Yeah.
and it's nice to hear that you're able to do that, because I think for a lot of people that they're not able to have that as an issue. It's more like, I'm not enjoying this, but this is what I have to do, or I have to do this to either make a living, or I don't. Some people may not have goals as set as perhaps you did, that they didn't really know what they wanted to do. So,
That's possible. That'd be tough.
yeah.
It'd really be
It would
tough.
be a hard,
you know what I mean?
hard life to.
I refuse to do things that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
You got your own life.
Uh-huh.
Look out after yourself.
That's
and
great.
Have a good philosophy about life, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there a particular gig or series of gigs that you can remember that was like, man, one of the real highlights of your career?
Well, I enjoyed playing with Bob Haggart and Yank Lawson in that band.
Yeah.
That was a good band.
It just about lived up to the title of the band. Eh?
Yeah. We didn't give it that title.
Right,
you know
I
what
understand
mean?
that,
But we had a great band.
yeah.
And the guy sent me a tape, cassette, from Minneapolis. We played at a place, this goes back to the early 70s. We played a place outside of Minneapolis called the Emporium of Jazz. And the band was Benny Martin on trombone, Yank Lawson, Billy Butterfield, Bud Freeman, Bob Wilbur, Gus Johnson on drums, Bob Haggart, myself. And he recorded one night when we were playing in there. And he sent me this tape, and I hadn't heard it. I mean, I'm going to the airport with my wife. We put this thing in played this, and I couldn't believe it, man. It gave me a
hot,
few
huh?
goose pimples, you know what I mean?
It was swinging?
Oh, man. It's like Fat says, that right ticking rhythm, man.
Yeah, right.
Everybody was playing, man. And the joint was jumping.
The joint was jumping.
And Gus Johnson on drums, man. Probably one of the greatest drummers I ever worked with. Really. He was right with you. We used to work, Gus and I used to work up in Billings, Montana in a hotel up there, just the two of us. So I gave us our names of Frick and Frack. And we'd go up there for a 4-week engagement, you know.
Wow.
Play 6 nights a week, off the 7th, so we'd be in somebody's home, somebody asked out.
Yeah.
Gus would do the cooking, and I'd make my hot sauce.
Oh, great. Improvising in the kitchen. Huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Switching in the kitchen.
Yeah. You must have had developed quite a good left hand when you were working with just a drummer, no bass player, huh? Did you?
Well, I had that going.
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's been a
from
part
the
of your
beginning.
playing. Yeah.
Well, I was when I was a kid, listening to Fats Waller.
Yeah.
Look at he covered that thing, man.
That's a hard style. That stride.
Not if maybe it is, but if you love it and like it, then it's not hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's been a great philosophy. Love it and like it, and if you don't like it, don't do it.
That's right.
I think I can live that way from now on.
Why not, man? It's the best way.
All right.
For us. You got to have a little stubbornness in there to see it goes that way.
Yeah. And next time a singer looks at me like that, I'm going to remember what you did. I don't know if I'd have the nerve to do it.
Why not?
You didn't want to work with her again anyway, right?
No, I don't need her.
That's before we wrap up, you just mentioned playing at a fashion show. You know, it's interesting the kind of things that people don't maybe think about where you have played. You know, different things, functions that you play for. Has there been one thing that you can recollect that was like a real oddball type of gig that you played? That's a hard question, I know.
Yeah,
because I know that
I'd have to give that some thought.
most people have them, but you kind of put them back here so that they're not.
I'd have to think that over.
Okay,
I can't,
well,
can't come up with an answer.
Part
to that.
3 with Ralph Sutton. We'll get into that. Well, I'm looking forward to the concert tonight.
We're going to have some fun.
You're going to have some fun. You got a great group coming in with
Yeah.
Scott Hamilton, Warren Lachey, and of course Bob Haggard, who we're going to talk with,
Kenny DeVerne.
Kenny DeVerne, and Bobby Rosengart.
Right.
It's quite a cast. So, on behalf of Hamilton College Jazz Archive, I want to thank Ralph Sutton for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure, and enjoyed your philosophy on life and music. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you.